Hello and welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul, my co-host Justin Baker. Joining me this morning, it is a beautiful Saturday morning in February, freezing cold. I opened up the sliding door to let my dog out, and there was just happened to be a gust of wind, and it like smacked me in the face. So that was a wonderful way to wake up this morning. But gotta love the cold weather. It means that we are deep in the hockey season.
Dude, you're not kidding about the cold weather. So for those who don't know, it was mid-40s yesterday and then dropped a good 20 degrees. So not only did I wake up to a smack in the face like yourself letting the dog out, but went outside to check the mailbox and almost slipped on my face because everything froze over.
Yeah, so I'm guessing then that you failed to shovel your driveway after that slight snow yesterday.
So, yeah, driveway's good, but the front porch, not so much.
The porch. We were over at a friend's house last night, and they hadn't shoveled their driveway, and I was like, dude, you probably want to, I know it's like 10:30 and we've been drinking, but I think you want to get out there and shovel a little bit of your driveway, because it's about to turn into a sheet. All right, that thing's going to be a rink in the morning. I'll be fine. No, I'm guaranteed it's a rink.
It's a rink.
It's a rink. Well, on today's show, we wanted to start deep diving into different teams across the league as we're inching ever closer to trade deadline. We're about a month away, and a lot of things have been happening since we last spoke. The Edmonton Oilers have finally graciously fired their head coach, and Jay Woodcroft is now the new head coach. So Dave Tippett, sayonara, thanks for trying. Edmonton trying a new coach. The fourth in 7 years for Connor McDavid, I believe, since he was drafted in 2015. So it's nothing compared to Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who I think has had, 11 coaches that Ryan Nugent-Hopkins has had in his career. Just a crazy amount of coaches. But we wanted to do some deep dives. We're going to do the Edmonton Oilers. We are going to talk Boston Bruins. A lot's been happening with the Bruins. And then we want to jump into some Vegas Golden Knights because Jack Eichel seemingly could be on the horizon, and trying to figure out how they're going to fit him under the cap. And then, of course, the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think, probably the best team in the league that no one has faith in. Like no one has faith in them. Yet they're like top 5 team in the league in terms of points percentage and in many other factors, expected goals and all this. So they're an elite team, but nobody expects them to get out of the first round. So we got to figure out why, and we'll go from there. So let's start with the Edmonton Oilers. The Edmonton Oilers fire their head coach. They bring in someone who has never been an NHL head coach before, although he has been an assistant for a long time. He's been the head coach of their AHL team. Kind of a safe move, because the Oilers have had a lot of young guys move through their system lately. So Jay Woodcroft has been the guy who's been bringing these guys up onto the pro roster. So what better time? Kind of a Jeff Blashill, Sheldon Keefe. There's many guys who have been promoted within from their AHL organization. Those two guys are the first ones that come to my mind. What do you think that he's going to do? Have already played one game against the Islanders, which is, I don't know, not really a test. But what do you think he's going to do different than Dave Tippett?
Different? Oh, man, I don't know if he can do much different. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some line juggling. That always seems to occur a little bit when you get new coaches, right? They try to mix things up a little bit, and so I'm going to pair this guy with this guy, and I think this guy should be playing with this person. But outside of that, really, I think, the Edmonton Oilers, they've got Duncan Keith now on the shelf, so I think one guy who's going to see a lot more playing time with their new head coach is going to be Evan Bouchard.
Definitely.
I think a guy like that can have an opportunity and see if he can't help boost this offense a little bit more. I know he's not the best as far as on both sides of the puck defensively, but he's got a lot of offensive abilities, in my opinion, who's someone who can help jumpstart maybe a little bit, on the back end there when, maybe when Tyson Barrie hasn't been having the best of seasons, and Darnell Nurse, for whatever reason, I still don't understand why they gave him $9.5 million. Hasn't looked anywhere near like a $9.5 million defenseman. So, maybe he helps jumpstart Nurse's abilities back there. I don't know how to put it really, but outside of that, the other thing that I think we could see happen a little bit more, and obviously I was hoping for it last night against an easy team like the Islanders, but didn't happen, and that's to see Stuart Skinner play a little bit more minutes in net. Obviously, Koskinen and Mike Smith haven't got it done for this team. They haven't been great when Mike Smith's been healthy. He's been okay.
And to be fair, he hasn't even been healthy since he came back.
True. Absolutely.
I think they rushed or he rushed it. I don't know. He played fine last night against the Islanders, but again, it is against the Islanders, who are one of the worst offensive teams in the NHL. So kind of an easier night for a starting goaltender. Although, I mean, the Islanders did have 38 shots on goal, so
right.
It's not as
and that's the thing too, right? I think as a new coach, you have to implement, slowly try to implement by maybe trade deadline here in the next month, some new defensive strategies, right? I mean, obviously you don't get a full, camp with teams a full entire year, so it's a little bit harder to implement your systems, but I think he's got to tweak things a little bit more on the back end, because that's where the problem is, right? These goaltenders are struggling. Maybe give them a little bit more help to lock things down defensively.
I mean, here's the thing. I get, you've got the maybe the two best players in the entire world, Draisaitl and McDavid. Outside of those two guys, I just don't understand. Like everyone has, so many different people have tried many different iterations with this group. I think it's time to go, I think we need to probably hamper down on the defensive side of things for a while. Like, we are going to solely focus on that, and McDavid and Draisaitl are going to score our goals, but we're gonna play a grind it out. Like, maybe they don't have all the players to be able to do that, but definitely an intense focus on the defensive side of the game. I feel like it's the only thing they haven't tried. And the reason they haven't tried it is because, we have McDavid and Draisaitl. We can't be a defensive team. And,
right.
How many times Steve Yzerman, he shouldn't have to fight. It's Steve Yzerman. I mean, the guy's put up 130 points. How are we gonna tell him to be a defensive juggernaut? And then what do you know? He goes and wins a Stanley Cup because all of a sudden he's a Selke Trophy candidate every year. Brett Hull, garbage in his own zone. I mean, the year Brett Hull scored 86 goals, I want to pull up what his stats were for that year. But scoring 86 goals in an NHL season, you would expect that someone's defensive game would look pretty darn good. He was only a plus 23 with 131 points.
Jeez.
So, I mean, and 29 of those goals came on the power play. So, okay, let's scrap those. That means he scored 57 even strength goals, and he had 45 power play points total. So he had, basically 86 points on 5-on-5, and he was still just a plus 23. I mean, in 92-93, he scored 54 goals, 101 points, minus 27. He was not known for his defensive prowess. And not that plus minus means everything, but, you saw the way that he was, and the way that he was used once he went to Dallas. They win the Cup in 99. And he was much more committed to that defensive side of the game, and suddenly he wins the Stanley Cup. You see it over and over again, that until players are willing to play that defensive style of a game, that oftentimes it just doesn't end up working out in terms of actually winning. The Tampa Bay Lightning, when you look at like a Braden Point, Steven Stamkos, those guys are not, I mean, they're probably not winning a Selke Trophy, but they also are very good in their own zone. They're getting back. They're they're contributing defensively. And I'm not saying McDavid and Draisaitl aren't, but it doesn't appear with the Edmonton Oilers that there is much of a defensive focus. Whereas all the teams that have won the Stanley Cup over the last, like, let's go back to Pittsburgh. I mean, when Pittsburgh won those cups and they were missing their entire defensive core, it was like the whole team just played great defensive hockey together. And you know, and obviously they were the ones that started to change that speed game much more, and they were able to rush the puck up. But they win the cup on the backs of a full team defensive game. The St. Louis Blues, you don't need to talk much about them because they were one of those like defensive juggernauts that you just couldn't get into their own zone and even do anything. The Washington Capitals, I mean, it took Ovechkin so long to finally get to that prize because and it's not as if he was playing this pure defensive game, but the team as a whole had gotten to this point where they were playing really responsible hockey. And the list goes on and on. The Tampa Bay Lightning are incredibly responsible defensively and play a really good defensive game as a team. Not just, hey, we have a good defenseman in Victor Hedman, but as a team, they're committed to the defensive game. And I don't see that with the Oilers at all. Never have. And I think it starts with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. And yeah, maybe you're not going to get 150 points in a season, but I just wonder. I wonder if that's playing a factor.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100%. And I think, you know, for a team like Tampa Bay, for example, right, you look at and say, okay, the team was so blessed on the back end. They had Ryan McDonough, they had Victor Hedman, and the best goalie in the world, Vasilevsky, in net. So, yeah, when you do want to rush up and cheat a little bit on the, you know, at the forward position, you know, you have those guys watching your back, right? But, of course, you're still committed to that defensive game. You're still playing great in both ends of the ice. So, yeah, that's how things work out so well, and you can still grind out other teams and win those 2-1 battles. Now, when Edmonton gets down to the nitty-gritty time, they're not going to be able to do that. I mean, to put it frankly, you know, they can't do that play that kind of hockey. And so, you know, they're not blessed enough to have a superstar goalie. They don't have, you know, a top-notch, top 10 defenseman, you know, at least, you know, 2 top 20 defensemen easily, if you count McDonough in that conversation. So, you know, again, Edmonton doesn't have the personnel to play that type of game, but I think, you know, over the next year, you know, maybe this offseason they move some pieces around and try to bring in 1 or 2 guys who can play that shutdown type defensive game. And then now you have those forwards saying, okay, cool, now we have to be a little bit more responsible. And the perfect example I look at is a guy like Johnny Gaudreau, right? He was always flashy, trying to be, you know, the superstar forward Patrick Kane type guy. But the minute he tried to, you know, the minute Suter came in and tried to say, hey, you know what, you need to work on your defensive game a little bit more, he started playing that way. And guess what? The points still came in anyways, right? So if Edmonton's willing to play that type of defensive hockey, shutdown hockey, the points will still come for McDavid and Draisaitl. So right, I don't think they have to worry about that. Right, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, and you're still going to have players. I mean, you've got goal scorers. I mean, Evander Kane coming in, that was a nice scoop up. You know, as of this point, I haven't heard anything bad about him in the locker room, but that's not really, I would say that you're really not worried about that because generally things don't blow up in a day. Like right. A guy like him coming into a new situation, he's going to likely be on his best behavior, and he's only going to be here for, I mean, even if they make the playoffs and go on a long run, 4 months, which is probably not long enough for him to really cause a lot of issues. It's the year 3, year 4 when he's been there for a while, and it's pretty clear that Evander Kane is like those coaches where you're like, well, we could bring him in for like a year or 2, and then we're going to have to bring someone else in because it's like a Mike Keenan kind of coach. Just got to bring him in, let him do his thing, and then get rid of him real quick because it'll be a problem. That's Evander Kane.
What I will say about Kane, though, is like, so when he was with San Jose, he was expected to be the guy, the goal scorer, right? When he was in Buffalo, he was expected to be the guy, the goal scorer. Well, here in Edmonton, he's not that guy, right? Sure. He's 3rd or 4th down on the pecking order here in Edmonton. So, you know, he doesn't have to show up every day, and, you know, he doesn't get ragged on by the media as much. So hopefully that works out a little bit better.
Very true. Not in Phil Kessel was a much better human than Evander Kane has been so far. Not that he can't turn things around for his life, but it reminds me of Phil Kessel going to Pittsburgh on the ice, right? Like a guy who had been called upon to do everything wherever he had been, or where he had been previously in Toronto, and he goes to Pittsburgh and he's just one of the team, and he succeeds and they win, right? Like I think this situation could be like that for Evander Kane, and hopefully, whether it's Edmonton or somewhere else, he is able to and smart enough to go sign with a team where he is not the guy and that he's a complementary piece who can still put up your 30 goals for you in the regular season and wreak some havoc, which would be, I'm sure every team across the National Hockey League would love to have that, minus the personality and who the guy is off the ice. But okay, one last thing with the Oilers. What move do you see them making here as we approach the trade deadline? Are we getting a goalie, or are we just Ken Holland's baffled me thus far? I know that Korpisalo was in the mix. They didn't want to give up. I think they were asking for like a second and a third for Korpisalo. They didn't want to give that up. They offered I think it was Elliot Friedman said they offered a 5th round pick for Martin Jones. And Philadelphia said no thanks, because why would you give up a goalie for a 5th round pick at this point? What's the point? What's the reason? You're going to have to play somebody anyways, and Martin Jones has been playing just fine for Philadelphia, so a 5th round pick definitely not going to cut it there. What are the Oilers going to do? Because it seems like Ken Holland's kind of weary about this team, and he's not willing to move a lot of significant pieces to bring this team up to snuff.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, I think Edmonton, if they could add anything to the mix outside of a goaltender, they would like to add a number 2, number 3 right-handed shot defenseman. But again, it's not in the cards for them, in my opinion, because again, this team just doesn't have the assets to move. They don't have good prospects. They don't have enough salary cap to really bring in a big name player. So in my mind, really, I think you're going to have to go after a backup goaltender who potentially could be a number 1B type guy, and hope that maybe he comes in and just shines right in. Like sometimes a change of scenery, guys come in and they shine for just a small window, right? They come in and they just look excellent. And so I think maybe you might want to look at one of those type of players. And now in my opinion, yes, Korpisalo would be one of those players. But outside of him, maybe you could go after a guy like, for instance, Thomas Greiss in Detroit, who obviously is likely going to be on the move, and I think could potentially be a good 1B for a team that maybe, again, when we saw him with the Islanders, right, he played some good hockey early on in Detroit. He was playing some good hockey this season, maybe not so much, but again, I think if you put him in the right situation, he can still succeed as a decent backup goaltender. We've seen it with Martin Jones. He goes in, different situation and just has a little bit more success. So, another guy I could look at too, might be Yaroslav Halak. I think, again, Vancouver doesn't really want to pay him his bonus, but
right.
I'm not sure if he's crossed that threshold yet or not. But,
he needs to start 10 games. He has played in 10, but he has only started 9. So once he starts his 10th game, they will be paying him another $1.25 million or something like that. So
right there you go. So yeah, I think there's a guy that maybe they could come in and they can defer that bonus, I think, maybe to next season's salary cap. But
sure, yes, 100%. That is what happened. Yeah, you don't take
still,
it on.
I think that's a guy that could come in and potentially, take over in Edmonton. And I think that's ideally what I would like to see them go after too, outside of a right-handed shot defenseman.
Okay, and in my mind, the player that they should be looking to move, admit that you made a terrible trade for Warren Fogle, and hope that somebody is still high on him, because he hasn't been good at all for the Oilers. He got 5 goals in 45 games. I guess not that you were expecting him to put up huge points, but you were expecting him to play a little better defensively. He's a -15. He just hasn't found a spot, and maybe Woodcroft can find a spot for Warren Fogle where he can succeed. But making almost $3 million a year for the next couple years, I mean, he's definitely one of those hampers on the on the salary cap, because that's money that you could use on the defensive side of the game for someone who's really doing nothing offensively. Like you could slot in some guy on his ELC and he's going to put up 15 points in 45 games. So, I would say Warren Fogel's the one guy on there who's making decent money who you could move.
Yeah, and at 25 years old, too, I think there's still enough teams, given he's shown that he can put up 30 points. I think there's enough teams out there that might take a chance on him that, I mean, obviously, I don't think you're going to get anything back for him. They might give you a 6th-round pick, but, again, it might be worth taking next to nothing or future considerations just
for
to
the
get him
cap
off
space.
your books.
Right. Just for the cap space. Okay, well, let's move on to the Boston Bruins. The Boston Bruins have been kind of an enigma this year. They have been very, very good at times, absolutely dominant, and then they say, you know what? We should probably bring back Tuukka Rask. He wants to come back, and it's fair. He's been with them for a very long time. So Tuukka Rask says, "I want to come back. I think I can do this. I think you owe it to him to let him try." And obviously, he goes and he gets hurt pretty quickly again, and he's calling it a day. But the Bruins, since Tuukka Rask has came out of retirement, well, not out of retirement, but came back, signed with the team. In the last 10, they're 4-5-1. They were really rolling before that. I think that it really threw a wrench into what the team had going. And I think you've probably slightly insulted Jeremy Schwayman, who was sent down to the minors to keep Tuukka Rask up there. In my opinion, I think ultimately you look back at that and you go, whoops, we probably shouldn't have interfered with what we had going. But now the Boston Bruins, they're without Brad Marchand for the next 5 more games because of a suspension that he doesn't think that he should have gotten any games for, which is pretty interesting because he slashed a goalie in the face. But the Bruins sit in an interesting spot. They're gonna make the playoffs, but how good and how quickly can this Bruins team win a round against any of the teams that they would play in that first round, or do they kind of keep falling?
Yeah, I don't. Boy, this team's an enigma to me because at times, like you said, you look at them and they can be so dominant the way they play the game, but at other times they look like, honestly, they're lucky to even be in the playoffs, right, or to be in consideration for the playoffs. Now, I agree. They're going to get in the playoffs. They're going to, have to face a juggernaut in the first round, and they're going to lose. I mean, there's no simple way to put it unless one of their goaltenders show up and steal the show. I just don't think this team has enough firepower to get it done. And obviously, it's been nice at times. For the most part, I think Eric Haula between Pasta and Taylor Hall has been pretty good for a second line. But the problem is, Patrice Bergeron's getting, he's 36 years old, still one of the best faceoff guys in the league, but, he's got to stay healthy. And then Brad Marchand's got to not be suspended or not be in the box, right, to be effective.
Sure. And
so if he's not doing that, this team's in trouble because when you have a second line of Jake DeBrusk and Charlie Coyle and Craig Smith, you're in trouble. There's no other way around it. So that's the problem for this team, too. If they get in a battle, a scoring battle, especially for instance, with, say, the Florida Panthers or the Toronto Maple Leafs, they got to face one of those offensive juggernaut teams. Boy, it's when you get down to depth scoring, it's going to be impossible for Boston to keep up, in my opinion.
Yeah, it definitely looks like they're going to play one of Tampa, Toronto, Florida in the first round. Those 4 teams are in one sense doomed to play each other. It's going to happen. No one out of any of the. I mean, I guess you look at the Metro. And you say, well, you don't want to play Carolina in the first round. But beyond that, I don't know. You look at Pittsburgh and you go, okay, that's fine. They're having success. They generally have regular season success. And the last several years, they really haven't been able to do much in the playoffs. They've kind of crumbled by the time they get to the playoffs. The Rangers haven't won a round in the playoffs. And the Washington Capitals, you're looking at them right now. Are you really that scared of them in the first round? I mean, of course, it's the Capitals, but they're not a team that you're going, oh, if we have to play the Capitals, I don't know. Whereas I look at that Atlantic, and that's an intimidating first round for any team, no matter what. Like, if you're Florida and you have to play Boston, that's still an intimidating first round because Boston can put that top line together, and you don't know what's going to happen. You just don't know. Or if you have to play Toronto or Tampa in the first round. I mean, between Florida and Toronto, the two teams that are like, we have to get out of the first round, it would make for a really fascinating first round because, obviously one of those two teams is going to make it out of the first round for the first time the Leafs, they haven't been out of the first round since 2004, and the Florida Panthers haven't been out of the first round since 96. They're the two longest standing teams with no playoff series wins. So that would be, at least one of them would break their streak.
And it's a shame, too, because you look at that Atlantic division and you say, okay, we're going to lose probably, in my mind, a top 7, top 8 team in the NHL right out of the gate in the first round, right? One of those guys have got to lose and go home. And then even more so in the Eastern Conference, you're looking at a top 4 team going home in the first round, which just sucks.
Yeah.
So,
if we did the old school way, the 1 through 8, as I see it right now, if it were that way, and now granted that way had 3 divisions, but we'll just, the 2 top division winners would be right now Florida and Carolina. So Florida would play Boston, Carolina would play Washington, Tampa would play Toronto, and Pittsburgh would play New York. So even in the old way, you'd still be looking at the same the same thing, one way or another. The Leafs are playing some ridiculously good team. and we've talked about it before. The high end teams right now, like the top 5, 6, even 7 teams in each conference, are so much better than the bottom teams. Like the bottom teams in the league right now, there, in my mind, there's less parity right now than maybe there has been in the last 15 years. The way these bottom teams, Arizona's so bad. Montreal is so unbelievably terrible. I don't know that we've seen 2 teams be this bad. Like and then you go into Buffalo and Ottawa and Philadelphia and New Jersey. They've all been bad. They're all. I know New Jersey randomly goes and beats the St. Louis Blues 7-4, but watching the Leafs play New Jersey in a back-to-back, watching them 2 games in a row, try and keep up with the Leafs it wasn't even fair. It really wasn't even fair. There's just such a disparity between the top and the bottom teams now, where maybe 10 years ago you went, man, the 8th seed has a shot to beat that top seed every year. I don't think that's the case right now. Like, I think that probably Florida or Tampa would, like you said, probably roll with Boston. They are scary because of that top line, but they just don't have the depth. So without the depth, is there any way that they can, do you think they're going to go out and acquire somebody to bring themselves up to snuff with the rest of that division?
Yeah, I think if Boston's going to make any moves at the deadline, I think obviously, right, getting some more depth scoring would be great. But to me, I think their biggest priority is going to solidify a top 4 defenseman on the left side, right? I think, obviously the biggest candidate in my mind that sticks out is Jacob Chychrun. He would be fantastic to play in this, system with Boston. And, McAvoy's been great with Grzelcyk on the left side. But when you look at that second line, right, Mike Riley and Brandon Carlo, I don't know what to tell you. There's really not a whole lot outside of McAvoy. And so, they need somebody who can lock up that left side a little bit better because, boy, if they have to get into a defensive game, I think, again, they've got so much money invested, in guys like Grzelcyk, Forberg, Mike Riley. They've got over $9 million, close to $10 million invested in these 3 defensemen that are basically doing nothing for you. Brandon Carlo's been fine. But, again, outside of that, those 3 guys have done absolutely nothing for you. And you need guys on the left side who can rotate, who can play big minutes. And to me, I don't want, any of those three guys playing big minutes for me. So to me, that's the priority if you're Boston. I know they would like to get, a big name forward. They always seem to, every deadline, it seems like they're going after a big name forward. And maybe this year they get lucky and, who knows? David Krejci comes back after the Olympics and says, you know what, I still want to play in the NHL.
Oh, boy.
Decides to return. So
that would be,
that would be great for them. But yeah. But outside of that, I think their focus needs to be on acquiring a big name left side defenseman.
All right. Let me tell you my move here. I know he's been rumored to go to the New York Rangers, but I think this could work. Joe Pavelski. I mean, who better to come in and center that second line than Joe Pavelski? Okay, Joe Pavelski, straight up for Jake DeBrusk.
Straight up
for Jake DeBrusk.
Oh, see, okay. So here's my problem with that. I love the Joe Pavelski,
and the salary wise, it works. It clears the amount of deadline space they have versus what he makes. Yeah, they wouldn't have to do any and here's the other thing. Maybe what you do is you say, Dallas, you're going to take half of Pavelski's cap hit, and then you're going to take Jake DeBrusk. That would leave Boston. Oh, they'd only be taking on an extra $1 million. That would leave them with $4 million left of deadline cap space. So that could be interesting too. That would get them some more space and an ability to go out and do more. But
yeah, I do think though, as far as DeBrusk for anybody is concerned, when you move a guy like DeBrusk, obviously everybody knows Boston wants him gone. They don't want to keep him around. He hasn't produced at a $3.6 million contract. But for a team like Dallas, yes, getting a young piece would be great. A guy who maybe, can come in and rejuvenate his career. And, he's still young enough to where you can still make something of this guy, right? But to me, the qualifying offer you have to give him to keep him in Dallas is just a little too high. That I think you're going to want something back in return. And that would maybe be, a future third-round pick or something like that that's going to have to come with them in order to snag a big piece like Joe Pa.
Okay. Yeah, okay, so what the Rangers have been rumored to get Joe Pavelski. What do you think it's going to take to get Joe Pavelski then? If not a guy like Jake DeBrusk, who I mean, are the Rangers giving up a first-round pick for Joe Pavelski?
Yeah, I honestly think, yes, the Ryan Strome rumors, right? I mean, obviously he's not under contract, and they're trying to debate whether or not to keep him around long term. That's been going on, but I do think, obviously, if you're Dallas, right, the starter conversation is you start with, maybe Capo Caco. You start with a guy like that. Obviously, they're not gonna let that fly. No. Or maybe a Brandon Schneider on defense. I don't know. Again, these are pieces that I think are starter conversations for Dallas that, Rangers will shoot down immediately. But I think in the long run, it's just going to come down to draft picks, right? Maybe they're going to have to throw
in that case, you're giving up a first-round pick for Pavelski. I mean, maybe straight up a first-round pick. First-round picks, things have just changed so much. Teams are just not willing to just willy-nilly throw around their first-round picks for a rental. But I mean,
right,
Pavelski,
and that's why I think a couple seconds, maybe.
But I don't know. In my mind, I guess you're looking at would you rather have 2 seconds, or would you rather have a guaranteed player who can play in the NHL like Jake DeBrusk?
Oh, sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, there's less of a risk with a guy like Jake DeBrusk, but to me, the salary issue is where it comes into play, because now what you got to give him $4 million to qualify him. I mean, I don't want to pay Jake DeBrusk $4 million, so
no, you don't. But you can sign him, yeah. And maybe that's where you say, well, we want to talk to him about an extension then, and you see if he's willing to sign something more like a $3 million a year extension for 3 years or 2 years or something. 2 years, I think, would take him to unrestricted free agency. But yeah, it'll be. I mean, the other thing is the Dallas Stars. I mean, as much as Joe Pavelski's been rumored, the Dallas Stars are going to make the playoffs the way they're playing right now. They are 3 points out of the playoffs with 4 games in hand. They're going to make the playoffs. So maybe all this Joe Pavelski talk is moot, because I don't know that they're dealing him if this is the case,
Oh no, if they think they can get in, they're not dealing it for sure. No way.
Yeah. Things can change in an instant, where we're like, man, the Stars just don't look like they're anywhere close. And then bang, there they are. And suddenly nobody's talking about trading John Klingberg anymore. All right, let's skip on over to the Vegas Golden Knights, who are they were in a predicament, and there's talk about Mark Stone going on LTIR because he's been having a recurring back issue. That's what held him out earlier in the season was some kind of back issue. So there's chatter, I guess, that they're going to put him onto LTIR so he can get some rehab for his back. And while he's on LTIR, Jack Eichel will come back. And if that's the case, obviously those numbers work. He's a $9.5 million cap hit. Jack Eichel's $10 million, so they'll be fine in terms of the cap hit there. So then, do they just pull a Kucherov and just keep Mark Stone out until the playoffs, bring him back, and away you go? And then you've got your team, and then you can figure it out in the offseason. Do you think that's what they end up doing? Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, why wouldn't you do that? Because then you get Stone healthy. As Vegas, as weak as the specific division is, and in my mind, right now, LA and Anaheim look like they may not make the playoffs. We don't know, So those two teams are very questionable. So between yourselves and Calgary, really, you're almost a lock for the playoffs if you just keep playing some decent hockey. So, again, getting Jack Eichel is going to be your trade deadline acquisition. We know that. That's how Vegas is going to consider this move. But and then getting Stone back for the playoffs, much like Kucherov for Tampa Bay, it's going to be a huge addition. The question mark for me, though, for Vegas is not so much those two guys between Eichel and Stone. I'm more curious about Alec Martinez because he's rumored to be coming back here pretty soon as well. And once his cap hit comes back, then it's tough to get Jack Eichel back in, right? So now you almost have to move salary out to fit him in. So maybe you have to move $3 to $4 million in salary cap just to try to make, Alec Martinez fit. Because again, you don't want to lose out on, a guy like that coming back to the lineup because he's such a big piece of that back end. Between, Theodore and Pietrangelo. Again, what do you do if you're Vegas to try to squeeze him in? And of course, the obvious candidates people have been looking at, Evgeny Dadonov, Riley Smith, Jonathan Marchessault, show that one of those guys have got to go. Yeah. Well, I mean, and the most obvious one, I guess, in my mind is Dadonov because he's the least productive of those players, and he's under contract for multiple years. Like, it's one thing if they get rid of Riley Smith, okay, that's fine, but they're going to be right back at this again in the off season because they're going to have to move someone else because there's this way if they trade Dadonov, then essentially hey, Riley Smith's contract ends and you've traded Dadonov, so that's $10 million that will be off the books for next off season, and then you're in a much more flexible position. So I mean, if they can trade Dadonov, that in my mind is the most ideal. They obviously can't hold any salary. So if they're trading him to who knows. So I mean, he does have a no move.
10 teams.
10 teams. Okay, yeah. So it's not like you can just deal him to the Arizona Coyotes and call it good. Although I don't know they would take him, but you know what I mean. Like you can't just deal him to a bad team who's willing to take on his contract. And it's likely in my mind, like I guess for Dadonov, you might get a third round pick back for him. He's probably about a 40 point player, 20 goal guy. So I mean, it's not as if he's completely unproductive, but in my mind, he's the guy that has to go. But even so, that might still not be enough to get it done unless you're putting these guys on LTIR, which it looks like they're going to try and do. Sneaky. The other thing I guess might be William Karlsson. You dealing William Karlsson? I mean, he's $6 million. He's only got 17 points through 33 games. is someone willing to take that on? I mean, he's 29 years old now. It's funny. Vegas is actually Vegas is an old team. You know, their best players. I mean, Mark Stone, he's about to turn 30. Max Pacioretty's 33. William Karlsson's 29. Marchessault's 31. You know, you're not. They're not the youngest team in the league by any means. They don't have very many players under the age of even 26. I mean, especially guys playing significant roles. So that's at least at the forward position. So
yeah, Jack Eichel's going to help there a little bit.
That's true. Yeah, Jack Eichel is the young one there, 25. But yeah, I guess all that aside, Vegas has they've for a variety of different reasons have faltered since making the Stanley Cup Finals 4 years ago. What does this team have to do just to get out of the Pacific Division and almost I'll say get out of their head to make it past, into a significant area where I guess last year they were in basically what was the conference finals. Of course, they go and play Montreal, which wouldn't normally happen. It looks like they're probably going to play someone like Dallas or St. Louis in the first round. Maybe Edmonton if Edmonton turns things around and they get going. It's a little early to tell who they'd play in the first round, but barring everybody's health and Jack Eichel coming back, they're not going to have much time together as one cohesive unit. And that would be the one thing that worries me with them is, yes, you could get Jack Eichel back. Mark Stone could go on LTIR, but then what? You're bringing back Mark Stone, and it's the first time you've had this lineup ever to start the playoffs. It's not like Tampa Bay with Kucherov, where Kucherov's been there for a long time. You know what you're going to get. Everyone, the guys who played with him before have played with him before for years. This is a situation where no one's played with Jack Eichel before. And that's got to be a concern. In a 7-game series, I think a team could take advantage of that.
Yeah, for me, if I'm Vegas, right, I don't want to rock the boat too much. And what I mean by that is these line combinations, right? Because Chandler Stevenson with Pacioretty and Mark Stone has been a pretty good top line, right? I mean, Chandler Stevenson, again, ideally is not a guy you want long-term at your number one center position. But I think you throw him in there at that top line with those two wingers, and you keep that Karlsson, Marchessault, and Riley Smith line. This is, again, assuming that you work out some magic where you get to keep these guys together and you don't have to trade one of them away. Keep those top six lines or those top six players together on the lines they've been playing with all year, not to rock the boat, right? And so then you put a guy like Jack Eichel on the third line, top power play minutes. I think you give him the opportunity to not only come back and ease into the lineup a little bit more, but he's the type of guy who, especially in Buffalo, he just takes over a game by himself, right? I mean, he literally will put a team on his back.
He literally didn't play with anyone in Buffalo, so
right, exactly. So now maybe you throw him and you put a guy like Nolan Patrick on his wing, a Janmark on his wing, right? A guy who, guys who are responsible defensively, and Matthias Janmark, and then maybe he helps jumpstart Nolan Patrick a little bit offensively, and then now you can send him out there, when those top six guys aren't working, and you can have Eichel just take over the game. Right, you can ease him back in there, and then you don't have to worry about upsetting any chemistry there. And then, again, come playoff time, if it's not working out with those top six guys, then yes, then you have that opportunity to throw Eichel in there and mix things up a little bit more to help jumpstart those lines.
But if they put Mark Stone on LTIR, then your lines are going to be mixed up.
Well, so right now they've got Evgeny Dadonov with Chandler Stevenson and Pacioretty, and so just keep that line as is, right? Leave it as is and just let them roll. Yep.
And then, but if Mark Stone is the one you put on LTIR, then you've got an open slot on the wing. I guess Karlsson could move to the wing. You're not really as concerned probably about a center moving to the wing as you would be a winger moving to center. So you could do that, or Pacioretty could move over to the right side. I don't know. Some guys are weird about that. Moving to their off wing, but I know now it's much more of your F1, 2, 3 as opposed to, hey, you're playing center, you're playing left wing, There's much more of a free flowing game, anyways. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do, because on top of bringing in Jack Eichel, I mean, there's not much more this team can do. You know, it's not like they can go out and make their typical deadline splash like they've done in the past. Outside of maybe they, you know, if they were to move, like be able to move someone, you know, someone with salary. I don't know who they would. There's just not anybody to even move.
Right.
Although if Mark Stone goes on LTIR and Eichel comes back, yeah, then Martinez comes back, and there you go. There's your cap space. So they're not doing anything. They don't have anything available to them unless they were to trade a Dadonov or something, which I'm sure they're not dying to trade Dadonov. It's not as if he's played badly. I mean, are you going to trade Dadonov and then go out and get another guy who can put up 45, 50 points potentially? Probably not.
Right.
So,
and that's why you hope Nolan Patrick comes back to form a little bit, right?
Yeah,
that's what you brought him in there for.
Yeah, go out and dominate like you did the WHL, and you'll be fantastic. I mean, I guess the positive is that they are in even though, you know, yeah, teams have played well, they're still in a weaker division. Definitely the weakest of all four of the divisions. So it buys them some time, and I mean, when all is said and done, they're going to be there. They're going to be in the playoffs. They're going to likely win a round or two. But yeah, that's Central. I mean, we're kind of gearing up here for like a Colorado Vegas conference final, which would be pretty epic.
Oh, I hope so.
But other teams have been flying too. I mean, Calgary's 3 points back with 4 games in hand. I mean, they're going to probably pull ahead of Vegas right now. So there's no guarantees they're going to finish tops in the division. But when Jack Eichel gets back, I think all bets are off, and that's what they're waiting for. They're just waiting for Jack Eichel to come. So
yep.
All right, let's move on to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Again, like I said at the top of the show, a team with the 4th best points percentage in the league, and they aren't getting much love. I think if they were any other team, honestly, like any other team with their composed roster and their stat lines, that we would be talking about, wow, this team could win a Stanley Cup. But because of past experiences with the Toronto Maple Leafs, most people look at this and they go, they're probably going to lose in the first round. They're not tough enough. That's just like keeps coming around. They're not tough enough. And I don't think that we look at many other teams in the NHL, whether they're tough enough or not, and think that that's why they would lose in the first round. But my question for you, what do you think that the Leafs need to do to, aside from winning, you can't do anything right now about winning a playoff round. There's no winning a playoff round right now. We're in the regular season. But what do they do now to, I guess, solidify their roster a little bit and make you comfortable with them going into the playoffs, that yes, this team is indeed capable of being tough enough?
Yeah, you know what, the toughness, I don't know if there's too much they can do to really make any moves that are going to make sense for me, right? Because when you look at guys that they have to take off, like maybe a David Kampf or Jason Spezza, guys that they would have to move or shift, down in the lineup to really bring in guys to bring that toughness, right? I don't know if for me that makes any sense. Obviously, the one guy I think when Toronto's looking at the deadline that a lot of analysis and writers are all saying this is the guy that's likely to move, and that's Alexander Kerfoot.
No, there's no way they're going to move Kerfoot. He's been so good for them.
I agree, but again, there's got to if you're bringing anybody of significance in to help make this team that much better, money's got to go out, right? And because money's coming in, and Kerfoot really is the guy that can probably get you the biggest return right now, especially at that cap hit for what he's producing. So I'd say the only way I'm willing to trade Kerfoot is if I'm bringing in Joe Pavelski.
I think that would be, if you did straight up Kerfoot for Pavelski and then the Stars keep half of Pavelski's salary. I think that's the only way. That's the only way that you could justify trading a center who can do everything, is to bring in somebody who's just straight up a point per game player, and he's on pace for 40 goals. Like, I think Joe Pavelski would be a very good upgrade. As much as you don't want to lose Kerfoot, though, who's still under contract next year, which I think is why Dallas might be willing to do something like that, is that he could bring speed to their team in exchange for but like I said, looks like the Stars are going to make the playoffs. So who are your other options? You've got Claude Giroux and like a Phil Kessel. Those two players are the only two players that, and I don't even know if Kessel's an upgrade on Kerfoot. I don't think he is. They actually have almost the exact same stat line. I think Kessel's got one more point than Kerfoot and the same amount of goals, 6 goals. So it's not as if he's really been any more effective than Kerfoot. And Kerfoot's playing third line minutes.
All right, so I'm going to float 2 names out to you, though.
Okay.
Guys that I think you could probably get done on 1-1. Well, one of these guys I think you could get done on a 1-1 swap. First guy, Kevin Fiala. I think you could easily just say, let's go Kerfoot for Fiala. I think Minnesota could use some help at the center position. And I think for Toronto, they still get that production back without having to lose anything. Now, again,
yeah, but he's more expensive.
Right.
And he's put up the same amount of production as Kerfoot.
No, I agree. The cost thing is there too, and I think maybe Minnesota has to send a little piece back with you, a 4th or 3rd round pick or something, because again they're getting term, right? They're not going to potentially lose out on a guy, but Kevin Fiala is an RFA, so again that's another thing to consider. The other guy that I look at too, who could potentially come in and slot right in. Now again, I think this would probably cost Toronto a draft pick along with Kerfoot, but Thomas Hertl. I think Tomas Hertl would be fantastic to come in, and he could play center. He can play on the wing. He can basically play anywhere in your lineup. Penalty kill, power play, top minutes. And this is a guy who scores goals too. So
yeah.
To me, I would love to see him.
Tomas Hertl would be definitely an upgrade because of what he brings defensively, and he would be somebody. Even though he's not the biggest guy, but he's definitely somebody you would say he uses what he has. I mean, he's not small. He's 6'2", 215, but he just plays kind of. He just skates so well. It seems like he's shorter. Right. He's somebody he's tough enough. He's definitely tough. Like he'll push his way through. He uses his body effectively, and that he's good in the playoffs. He's always been good in the playoffs when they make it. So, that would be a very interesting acquisition. But I did actually just see this morning that the assistant general manager of the Sharks, whose name is escaping me in this moment, but he's the acting GM because their GM is on medical leave. But Tomas Hertl, he said, we have no interest in trading him, and we're in contract talks right now. He wants to stay with the Sharks, and we want him to stay. So I think it's likely that the Sharks do get something done with him, unless Hertl doesn't think they can win, which earlier in the season, Hertl was venting some frustrations about losing. He didn't like it. He hadn't been to the playoffs since 2018-19. I mean, and does anybody see the Sharks making the playoffs next year? Because I don't. I don't see them getting any better. So, I mean, if he's willing to stay there because he wants to play there, that's, hey, good on you. That's fine. If he wants to win, then he's going to leave. That's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's how it's going to be. So we'll see how interested Hertl is in winning. But he could definitely. My guess is there would be teams who were looking to acquire him with the intention of, like, he would need to sign an extension with them when they traded for him. So that to me would make it a little harder for the Leafs to acquire him if there were teams out there who were willing to offer him an extension, because then those teams are willing to give up more assets to acquire him as well.
Sure.
But a Kerfoot for Hertl straight up would be nice. But yeah, I wonder if, you look at the composition of their team, and you wonder if maybe it's, Jake Muzzin hasn't been as good this year. Justin Hall hasn't been very good. I think he's probably the one guy you could. He's making $2 million. You could move him, and then you need to go out, and if you're looking to really upgrade your defensive side, it would be getting rid of Justin Hall, using your first round pick, and going out and acquiring a defenseman. What defenseman that would be? I mean, Mark Giordano could come in and not for a first round pick, but Mark Giordano would be a nice acquisition. Even like someone simple as like a Nick Leddy, if the Wings are willing to eat salary and they can move him to someone else and they eat half the salary, things of that nature. Maybe even though Rasmus Ristolainen hasn't been the best for Philadelphia, maybe you're willing to take a shot on him if he comes cheap. And then, I guess the big question is, do the Ducks, when all is said and done, do the Ducks think they can make the playoffs? That's the, and then you've got Hampus Lindholm or Josh Manson, who could potentially be on the block. Because as much as there's a hope that Anaheim could make the playoffs, you look at the numbers and you go, well, Dallas is going to catch them. Edmonton's probably going to catch them. And they're going to fall out pretty quick, I think, here. So we'll see, especially if they keep playing 4-4-2, kind of like 500 kind of hockey. There's no way they're making the playoffs. And maybe in 3 weeks they look at this and go, we need to get something for our assets. Probably not Lindholm, but maybe some of their other UFAs.
Yeah, so let me float this name out to you, because I think if Toronto's looking to upgrade on defense at all, and I think they do need someone, I think it's someone on the right side, right? A right-handed shot defenseman, because, again, Morgan Riley's been great at that top line, but they haven't found anybody to play, significant minutes with Jake Muzzin to solidify that second pairing.
Well, then that was Justin Hall last year, who was great, and then this year right. He is just really fallen off the train there.
Yeah, and so maybe Hall moves out, but this name, I think, if you could somehow swing like Vegas did. You swing a 3-team trade where you get somebody else to eat, half, then another person eat another half. You could bring him in. His cost would only be $2.25 million in terms of a cap hit, moving out Justin Hall's money. Again, could find that wiggle room to bring him in, and that's, to me, an intriguing name that no one's really talking about because, again, his contract is so high. That's PK Subban. I think that's a guy who can really bring some spark, some fire to this roster. On the back end. Now, again, his production's dipped the last few years, but maybe he goes to Toronto and finds a spark because he's playing with such talented offensive forwards.
Oh, and he's playing in his hometown right there.
Right, exactly.
I don't think it's unlikely that PK Subban goes to Toronto, but I think it would be in the off season.
Sure.
Where he can sign, like he'll be 34 by the off season, and he's 33 right now. Yeah, he'll be 34 by the end of the season. Is he someone who would be willing to do the Wayne Simmons, Jason Spezza? Like, he's made $9 million for a while. He's made his money. Like, I wonder if he'd be willing to go to Toronto and take that big pay cut. Go for a 1 year, $1 million deal. I don't know if he's quite there yet, but if he wants to win, we'll see. One other name, John Klingberg. He's at 4.25 UFA. If you're willing to give up your first round pick for John Klingberg at the deadline, and you were to, if you moved him, you trade Justin Hall and a first round pick for John Klingberg, and you bring him in just as a rental. It would definitely solidify your top four, that's for sure.
Yeah.
You're essentially like, we could win you have to believe you could win the Stanley Cup, because that could be something that pushes you over the edge, bringing in someone like that. And I think that Dallas would be willing to move him for that. If Dallas, even though Dallas is in the playoff hunt, I don't know that Dallas is going to be willing to just let him go for nothing. Because even if they do make the playoffs, are they going to win? No, they're not going to win. So do you rather just like have a nice, like a first round exit with nothing to show, lose John Klingberg, lose Joe Pavelski maybe, or do you do you say, well, we'll keep Joe Pavelski. We think we can sign him to a 1-year deal next year. He likes playing here. John Klingberg's out no matter what, so let's deal him. And with some finagling, I think the Leafs could do it. That would to me would be the move where then you can put him alongside Jake Muzzin, and I know that both of them play the left side, but they can figure it out.
Yeah, good defensemen like that, they can play either side, right? So, I mean, yeah, that would be huge. That would be great for Toronto because then they get, a bona fide top pairing guy to come in and who can still put up just incredible offensive numbers on the back end. And then of course, then now you pair him with guys on the front end that just are, superstar talents. I mean, he's had, some decent guys up front for him in Dallas, but he hasn't had that level of talent
right
up front. I mean,
especially in the prime of their career, like
right.
Yeah, not many Austin Matthews is out there.
Right. Yeah. So now, I mean, you look at that too, and for a guy like John Klingberg, who doesn't have any no movement, no trade clauses to really hamper where he's going, so he doesn't have much control. But I mean, if you're Klingberg, you're salivating at that opportunity to go to a team like that because you hope that maybe you can go 2 or 3 rounds deep in the playoffs. But not only that, but then your production shoots up, right? So now you make a case for a bigger contract next year.
All right, I love it. One last question about the Leafs. Jack Campbell, is he in trouble? I think it's
in trouble.
He's allowed 5 goals in 4 of his last 9 starts or something like that.
Yeah,
he has not looked good since January began. He's got under 900 save percentage. Are you worried about Jack Campbell?
No, I'm not worried because I think again, Peter Mrazek coming back, I think he's going to help push a guy like Jack Campbell, right? I mean, I'm not sure where Mrazek's health wise is.
Oh, he's back. He's playing.
No, I know he's back, but I mean, I don't know if he's actually at 100% or if they just brought him back a little bit early because Jack Campbell is struggling, right? So assuming Mrazek's back 100% ready to go, I think it works out great for this Toronto team because, again, Jack Campbell's going to get pushed a little bit more because, you look at it and you can say, okay, well, Mrazek signed for 2 more seasons at $3.8 million. The idea was for him to come in and be a 1A, 1B. So Campbell's got to go out there, and now he's got to push himself a little bit more to try to earn that contract because I'm sure he wants to stay in Toronto. Obviously, he's not going to go cash in and get a big contract, but I'm sure he'd like a couple bucks. And
I mean, he was in the Vezina conversation just like 3 weeks ago. I think he's hoping for his Jordan Binnington contract, to be honest.
No, absolutely. And you know what? I think he's still a quality goaltender. And so I think now when you don't have to rely on him as much, there's not as much pressure on him to be the guy. I think he can go back out there and realign himself mentally and just figure it out. I think he'll be okay.
All right. I hope you're right. I think he will be too. I mean, who cares? Guys go on stretches. Like, it's funny because if a forward goes on a stretch where you're like, oh, he hasn't scored a goal in like 8 games, it's concerning, but it does happen. But then when a goalie has a few bad games, you go, oh boy, he's starting to have terrible games. Is he falling apart? No.
Right. We look at Jordan Binnington, right? He's had his last 3 games, he's led in 6, 5, and 7 goals, right? So, people start to wonder now, is he falling apart? And
well, Binnington's kind of a different story because he hasn't been good all year long.
Well, I'll agree with you on that one.
24 games, less than a 900 save percentage, 335 goals against, and it's not that they're playing bad defensive hockey because when Ville Husso comes in, who's got in 15 games a 1.9 goals against and a 9.41 save percentage, you go, wait, what? Ville Husso is about to be their starter.
Yes.
Oh, we'll talk St. Louis next show. There we go.
All right.
Well, Justin, enjoy the rest of your Saturday. For our listeners out there, you can find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk, and we'll be here. We'll talk to you guys real soon. I don't know what I'm saying now. I'm just, I think that I'm sitting in my basement right now, and I turned my heater off because it's cold, or because it makes a lot of noise. And now it's actually getting cold in here. So I got to go turn my heat back on. Justin, have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you guys soon.